this computer.
And then the screen sharing, and I think that.
Yes. So I will make you, let's see, go back here. I'm going to make you a host. Yes.
Great.
So that should do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
So now I think you have the power to put it on speaker. Oh, wait, no, see if I can still do it. Speaker view.
Yeah, I have it. Or, I mean, in terms of, yeah, sharing screen, I can do it.
Excellent. Good. Welcome.
Thank you.
Hey, let's see if I can get into the. All right. Welcome.
Thank you. Should I just start? Are we?
Yes, go ahead. Jump right in.
Okay, great. Let's do it. Okay, well, I do have a PowerPoint, so you won't see a lot of my face till the end. So I'm just going to start sharing that so we can just get to it. Okay, that should do it. All right, so good morning. And just again, thank you for the invitation to be with you all on this first Sunday. I heard the first Sunday of Summer Mission Adventure, which sounds fun. So I can't wait to hear more about that and what you all have been up to and what you're up to. I think by now, most of you know me, but just for those maybe who don't, I'm Chenoa Stock. I'm a Peace USA mission coworker, now serving in Peru in South America, and accompanied by my husband, Jose Luis, and our 4-year-old son, Leandro. So this picture is a little outdated, but that's from one of our trips a couple years ago. Currently, though, we are in St. Louis, Missouri with my parents while I complete my interpretation assignment, or IA, which is where I go around sharing with congregations like you all about God's mission being carried out by our partners in Peru. And I know I've been with you all a few times since I moved to Peru, but just has been learned in ministry and outreach, it's important to place ourselves on the map, understanding the country, the culture, the context, the history, and the people just for this context. So before we dive in into the partnership, I want to give a little more background about Peru. So Peru is a country of about 32 million people. Lima is the capital, has about 11 million people. That's where we were based. So that is a third of the total population in one of those in that whole country. So it is a crowded and busy city. From its desert coast to the Andean highlands or the mountains to the Amazon rainforest, Peru is one of the most ecologically diverse places in the world, rich with natural resources. Cultural diversity is also in Peru's story. It was part of the Inca Empire until it was invaded by Spanish conquistadors in 1532. With an abundance of land, minerals, and oil, Peru's natural resources have been endlessly exploited for economic growth and development, but to the detriment of many of its people. The gap between rich and poor in Peru is one of the highest in the Americas. Among the most impoverished peoples are indigenous populations, whose livelihoods and way of life are gravely impacted by contamination of air, land, and water. And amidst this panorama, Peru is considered to be one of the 3 countries in the world most vulnerable to climate change, due to its dependence on the runoff water from the glaciers. So it's within this context that I serve with the mission program of Perusa, a program of the Peruvian Joining Hands Network that facilitates the development and enrichment of partnerships between our global partners in Peru and U.S. congregations, principally through mission experiences. So basically how it works, I kind of see it as like a three phases. We work with and accompany our global partners in Peru to understand their local context and ministries and to support them in expressing their needs and struggles. We then share this information with U.S. congregations who either want to visit and serve or who simply care to provide them financial support for those projects and initiatives. And then it's through these exchanges and sharing the needs of our partners U.S. congregations are able to discern where their team's gifts, their talents, their skills could be used to serve during their 1-week mission experience in Peru. The Peru mission before and after the pandemic is to provide our service of organizing trip logistics, communicating, making arrangements with a global partner. But we also hope that through these short-term mission experiences, long-term partnerships are formed, that the sharing and walking with and mutual learning that happens in 1 week in Peru continues to blossom and grow when you return home. Through reflecting on your experience, educating your congregation about our partners in the country, through prayer, correspondences, or even returning for another mission experience. This is our mission focus and goal: to be the bridge or hub of partnership for any U.S. congregation wanting to connect to our partners in Peru. So who are our Peruvian global partners? In a country that is largely Catholic, but where non-Catholic Christianity is growing in popularity, we work with the Evangelical Church of Peru, or the IEP. The IEP is a large historic Protestant denomination. We work with the IEP in the southeastern, you can see it in the map there, the southeastern department of Cusco in the high jungle, as well as in the eastern department of Puno in the Andes Mountains. For more than a century, the IEP has placed major emphasis on leadership training rooted in local culture through a network of Bible institutes. We work and have accompanied projects with the Sicuani Seminary, have carried out medical campaigns in the Bible Institute of Sahiruyok in the high jungle outside of Cusco, and also serve with the Strong Women's Ministry of the IEP. With the IEP's focus on education, many of the shared projects revolve around construction of churches, Sunday school classrooms, educational spaces, or different workshops such as English, music, weaving. Again, it all depends on the gifts of the U.S. team and the accompaniment the global partner desires. We also work with some of the 8 partner organizations of the Peruvian Joining Hands Network and their advocacy work for health reform, environmental justice, and intercultural outreach. Now, as I've shared with you all in different moments, Peru suffered greatly throughout the pandemic, which exacerbated its ongoing challenges of great poverty and inequality, the healthcare system, education, employment, etc. Now, thankfully, their vaccination campaign has been very successful. A majority of the population has received both shots. I think they're working on their boosters now. They continue to wear masks indoors. It continues to be a law, or not a law, but a requirement by their government. So wearing masks indoors and on public transport. And so I think because of all of that, those strict requirements, they have been returning to a kind of normality in this past year. So how have our partners continued to serve amidst these challenging times that we're in? Given the food insecurity or lack of access to food that the pandemic has caused, many partners of the Joining Hands Network have focused on providing food for marginalized communities in different ways. Various partners have organized ollas comunes, or community kitchens, as well as delivering of food baskets. One pastor opened his church for Venezuelan refugees, while other partners facilitated workshops about COVID-19 and self and family care. Their mission has not stopped since the pandemic began. It was only modified to be relevant for their communities. Joining Hands has been working on an environmental campaign that has evolved for over 20 years and now focuses on national healthcare reform. So during the pandemic, the Joining Hands Network advocated, and this is kind of a photo of this, for the first ever federal law for environmental health. This is a photo of that vote coming into law. This law addresses injustices faced by people living with contamination from mining and extractive industries. It includes healthcare and environmental regulations and enforcement, considering the mining industry, the strong mining industry that is there. And so this happened now many months ago. So they're now in the designing and the implementation process. And this is a big victory for the communities with whom the network works, for those communities to have their voices heard and just those long-term injustices finally be recognized. Our partners of the Evangelical Church of Peru were also called to engage in alternative forms of ministry given that all churches and theological institutions were closed the entire year of 2020. So they did online classes, online church services, as we did, as the US also did, radio, house visits, and some of those online services weren't always reached by everyone, which is why they had to really adapt in different ways to reach their communities and congregation. In 2021, though, both the IEP Sikwani Seminary and the Bible Institute of Sihayuruyok in the high jungles of Cusco, where we have our strongest partnerships, began offering courses again. The Bible Institute has offered several short courses for the Women's League, which is one of the strongest ministries of the IEP for this region. In August, they held a large graduation ceremony for the first 10 women to complete the Women in Ministry course. In December, a graduation was held for fourth-year students of the seminary and for other ongoing courses of these institutes. And now the seminary is, of course, in a new academic year that started in March. They have 25 students at the seminary, and then other institute courses are continuing on. And in the midst of all of this, Joining Hands, the network, hired a new director after 20 years. The same director from the foundation, the founding of the network, had been there for these 20 years. And they finally hired a new director after the old one, retired. So Perusa and the overall network program is in transition, undergoing evaluation, doing really deep strategic planning for the future, mapping out actors, where we want to be, who do we want to partner with to address the most pressing systemic issues in Peru. And that is all undergoing now. So Perusa has not hosted groups since 2019, but we hope to open up travel up for 2023. The pandemic made us witness how important these mission experiences are, these face-to-face interactions that create spaces for intercultural listening and learning. It's not about doing all of the time, but simply being and being together in God's love. And I know our partners and US congregations who regularly travel to Peru have missed each other greatly. So we just are really hoping and praying that that partnership will continue, as it continues, that the in-person visits will continue soon. We are so grateful for how much has been accomplished and how many on the margins have been served, especially these past years, in solidarity. We appreciate the prayers and support of communities like yourselves, as that is what keeps us grounded and focused on our ministry in Peru and with our partners. And we would ask for prayers for wisdom and leadership in Peru, in the US, and around the world. Prayers for our partners as they not only work to keep their families safe and cared for, but also as they discern God's call for their mission during these uncertain times. And we give thanks that we can continue to accompany God's partners in mission. And even as it has changed these past years, we remain faithful to the Perusa mission and will continue to be that bridge between our partners and US congregations like yourselves. For now, more than ever, our call as a Matthew 25 denomination to love and serve and advocate for equality and justice for the least of these, to grow our partnerships however possible, to see that we are interconnected and can all learn from each other. This is where we must be as the church and for mission around the world. So thank you for your prayers and for walking with us in God's ministry in Peru. I just give thanks for the invitation to share more about how God is working through our partners as they daily lead us and walk with us in caring for the earth and all that is in it. Thank you.
Hi, Chenoa.
Hi.
It's Kathy. Carrie has another congregation, so she left.
Yeah, she
So
told me.
yeah, okay. So we were gonna ask some questions, I think.
Sure.
And who'd like to start?
Come on.
Come on. We have some of our participants in the summer mission adventure here.
Great.
Maybe someone wants to share some of that, but I guess I have a question. So you said you'll be doing the trips again in 2023 to Peru?
That's the plan for now. Yeah, it will require a lot of adjusting a bit to see, you know, how health protocols and everything, but I think that's the hope. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
The plan.
What is your role in that? Are you going to remain in the United States, or and go on the trips, or are you going to reside in Peru?
Yeah, as of now, I mean, I'm on interpretation assignment. The interpretation assignment is a requirement of PCUSA on, you know, of mission coworkers in a term to complete, you know, it's about 8 months that they want you to come back. And I didn't really come back even between my time in Bolivia and Peru, which I should have. So I was kind of behind even on this requirement. So I'm doing that since we were already here through December. So the idea would be that I would be back for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Questions?
Is COVID lessened there in Peru? Are they getting a handle on it? Is that why you left, because of the COVID?
No, we didn't. We actually, when it started in March, actually all mission coworkers were called back to return. And we decided as a family not to go for various reasons. We felt we could handle it where we were, as well as the bigger thing was really my husband was in the process of doing his immigrant visa, US immigrant visa, the green card process. And in that process, you can enter the country, but they really, lawyers don't recommend it because it could kind of mess up or have the immigrant people kind of question. So we wanted to just not mess that up either. So we stayed. And then in that process, sorry, it's a long answer, but in that process, my husband was given the interview. We had been waiting for his interview to come and everything just shut down in terms of consular services. And so it took about a year and something to wait through the pandemic. And he finally was scheduled his interview. And then once he has an interview, he has to enter the US. And so then we came here in May last year. And so we are doing some processes here. And then I decided, you know, since I'm already here, I might as well just complete this requirement that I have. So that's a long answer of why we're here. But Peru, as I said, the vaccination campaign is really strong. I think they also have, you know, people who aren't for the vaccine, but I think the majority of people are going for it and receiving it when it's available. I do know that now, just as we are as well, they're having a spike in cases currently. They're kind of going through I think this is their 4th or 5th wave of increase in cases. Now, what I don't know that I haven't read about is if the deaths. I know here, you know, our cases are rising, but at least the hospitalizations are still pretty low. I'm not sure if that's the case in Peru, but they were really hard hit the first year and a half. I mean, before vaccines got there, and because Peru is kind of middle economy, it's not, you know, it's not really poor as such, but it's not on the table with US and Australia and Europe. And so it was never really on the negotiating table to receive the vaccine. So they received vaccines pretty late, like much later than the US. And I think that's what kind of got them behind. But once they got the vaccines going, I think they got things in order. But those first, you know, the year and a bit that we were there, I mean, we were on major lockdown. My son, who's now 4, he was 2.5 at the time or something. He didn't go out for 113 days because children weren't allowed out. So we were in our apartment, which is really just, well, like, I can't even think about it now. But yeah, I went out, I think on Jose, my husband, did all of our shopping. Like, you could only go out on the lockdown, which was months long. You could only go out for, you know, groceries, bank, clinics, you know, or medical pharmacies or something. And then eventually after, I think it was those 3 or so months or more, children were allowed out, but only like staying within a block of your house or apartment, no balls, no bikes. It was just to walk and come home or whatever for 30 minutes, and they extended that as time went on. So it was pretty intense. The first year was very intense, and that, slowly opened up. And it is pretty, I think things are, from what I hear from partners and friends there, I mean, everything, the parks were all shut down, but that's all open. And now people, they had masks on for outdoors. Just only recently they lifted that, maybe a couple months ago. So only now is the mask mandate only for indoors and public transport.
Wow.
So they locked it down. I mean, they're still in a state of emergency. They've been in a state of emergency, meaning the government can, take, I don't want to say take over, but, can kind of take control when they feel they need to. And that's been since March 2020. They've been in a state of emergency.
Okay.
Okay, John, I was gonna try and get,
That's what,
I'm sorry.
when you,
Say your name.
John Summers, when you go back to Peru, what are like the accommodations that you stay at? Like, how do you live there? And what other projects are you working on?
Okay. We have an apartment in Lima. We're based in Lima. That's where the office of the Joining Hands, and Perusa, the program where I serve, is a program of the Joining Hands network. And basically how I see the work is for Perusa, this is the accompaniment program, is really kind of a three phases that, everything's been very different. We really only had one, we moved there in 2019. So we had one kind of real year, like normal year. And then that work has kind of been adapted and modified and everything. But how I did see it that first year was that we take the months basically from September to December to visit partners that's in that Cusco area or in Puno, kind of in that eastern southeast area, to visit with partners, hear about what their ministries are up to, what projects or initiatives where they would love to have support or visitors, or what they would like to teach people who would come down. So we take that chunk of time, that, trimester, if you will, September to December, to visit. And churches, I mean, I think each of the partners have different things going on. So the seminary, they're really wanting to improve and build a dormitory for their men. Like right now, I think their men are sleeping. I'm not sure what the circumstance is, but they want to finish. I think they started it, but then the pandemic shut things down. So they want a dormitory for the male. They also want to build like a multi-use salon, basically like a big auditorium, because right now they do all of their graduations and bigger ceremonies outside, but you never know kind of what the weather will do. They kind of put up a big tent. So they'd like to have like an auditorium. And these things would be, projects that they would love to have groups come down and be a part of. It doesn't have to be construction oriented, but these two happen to be. In the Bible Institutes, we've had groups that have done, again, I can't say kind of what they would want in the future, but we have done kind of the medical campaign where a church has brought nurses and doctors for a community that's kind of very out in the high jungle to basically set up a clinic for 3 days, where it's a free clinic for people to come talk with US nurses and doctors and do PT. And it's not necessarily saying, and by any means, that those doctors or nurses are better than the Peruvian system, but it's trying to support a system. As I said, the network is trying to focus on healthcare because that is not great there in Peru, especially after the pandemic. So it's really trying to give support to a system that isn't strong in Peru. Other churches have done CPR classes. So it's hard, it's difficult to say kind of what that will look like in the years. I know those seminary projects, those are two that are still looking for a partner that would come and kind of would love to have accompaniment in that. The medical campaign would probably happen again. But I think when we get back, it really will be more reconnecting, with the partners and just seeing where they are and checking in, and then just seeing what the needs are, the interests are. And so we, kind of talk with the partners. And the next phase is kind of talking with US congregations who have expressed interest. And then we try to match that, so if you have a congregation coming that has older people, maybe they wouldn't want to take that 6-hour trip through the mountains to get to a Bible Institute. Maybe they would want to stay closer, have an easier travel. Whereas maybe if it's a youth trip, that's something they could do. Or it really just depends kind of what group and what they want to do. And then the third of that is actually doing the trips, accompanying the U.S. congregations who come to be with the partners. If that answers your question. So, I mean, we'll have a lot of kind of reconnecting to do, I think, first off. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm curious to know if the organization is doing what the organization might be doing about the food insecurity, because I know that's what's been mentioned a lot. If that has changed lately.
To be honest, I have not heard about as many of those that were definitely in that first year. I mean, I feel like that was the main thing that many of the partners of the Joining Hands group, that's what they did in Lima. A lot of them in Lima, I think more than elsewhere, but I think in Cusco as well. I'm not saying there is no longer food insecurity, but I think it hasn't, from what I'm talking from such a small specimen of like what our partners are doing as opposed to like so many organizations in Peru are doing. But I know that hasn't been the focus of outreach in the last, 6 months or so. I know it was huge in that first year and a half though, of that's all they did. It was collecting money, it was collecting goods, it was delivering, it was, getting out there when they still had no idea what we were even dealing with, what was COVID-19, and our partners, were out there doing those deliveries. I mean, I don't know if that picture, I don't describe all of my photos on that PowerPoint, but there's that one picture where they're like tossing the food, to go up to these, because some of these communities are very marginalized out on the outskirts of Peru, kind of not in the mountains, but on the hills, where these houses are built. So they're kind of like passing up the assembly line of the food. But that I think now it's more post-COVID trauma, and care and family care or domestic situations. I feel like that's where a lot of groups are going. And I'm not saying the food insecurity is solved, but I can say that the community kitchens aren't as big as they were in that first year when it was really necessary, because now people are out working again. That even the informal sector who could not work or would work and probably get sick, and then even worse for their situation, they are all back, I think, back on the streets and can sell what they, the vendors and everything. So that situation has changed as COVID has gone on.
I have a question if nobody else. Hi, Chenoa, it's Jim, Kathy's husband.
Hey.
In the back, I don't know if you can see me, but anyway, I was curious, you mentioned some kind of a law was passed, sort of that would be helpful to your cause. And I'm sort of always curious what kind of government support you get or resistance you get to the kinds of work you're trying to do.
Yeah. So thankfully, which I think is smart in ministry and partnership in general, the Peruvian Joining Hands Network has many partnerships, many allies, if you will. They partner with bigger groups or smaller groups that also feel the same way. And so for years, I don't want to make this a lengthy thing, but they've had an ongoing campaign that started locally, that started with a smelter that they wanted to shut down because it was contaminating. They had evidence of that because of U.S. Advocacy from the Presbyterian of Giddings Lovejoy in St. Louis, actually. So that involved more into like a healthcare thing. They were saying, okay, we can shut down the smelter, which they did eventually, but then how is it affecting our people? Okay, our people are sick. Do we have a system that can help them? No. And so how do we look towards healthcare reform? So I can't tell you all the allies, but I know they've they've partnered with many organizations. So throughout these years, they've been advocating for this, this law that would basically recognize, not even recognize, address all of the environmental issues and kind of hold those companies, those mining companies, oil, whatever it was, to account for all of the contamination and the sickness. I am not on the forefront of that, in those meetings and everything, because that's not my role in Peru now. I'm not like the facilitator of the joining hands thing, but what I know is I feel like it was a very positive process from what I've heard and what from our partner, from the network, from the director and everything, that they were invited to meetings. They invited the affected communities, like one of our like leaders of the partnership in La Arroya. She was part of those talks. So it was very, you know, grassroots, if you will. It wasn't just kind of these higher ups talking about something, but the people, the communities were at the table. I'm sure there was much back and forth. I'm not going to say it was this perfect process and really peaceful, but like, I'm sure there was much back and forth, but I feel overall it was a very open table conversation. And I think in any ministry, I think when I was in Sri Lanka and Bolivia and now in Peru, whether you're a religious organization or not, and the Joining Hands Network doesn't really, I don't think it says it's this, it's an ecumenical is what they always say, an ecumenical network. It's not just denominations, it's also grassroots groups and community groups and otherwise. You just always walk carefully, you know, in your discussions with the government, and how you portray what you're asking for, what the ask is. And so I don't think there was any pushback as such. I don't think, I am sure over time, I'm not gonna, in La Arroya, those communities have had threats. I know they have. When this questioning has come in, even from their own people who worked in that smelter saying, why are you trying to take our livelihood and these jobs from us? But I think overall it was, in terms of with the government, it was an open discussion to get to this law. Sorry, I'm long-winded today, but I hope that answers your question.
That's great, thanks. I was curious, for the girls here, you doing any rock climbing these days?
No, oh my goodness, no, we haven't. Lima and Bolivia are so different. Lima, I'm not saying Peru. Peru and Bolivia are pretty similar in some ways, but Lima and La Paz, I should say, are so different in terms of, there were some rock climbing gyms where Jose would go, but not really much mountain that we had time for. I mean, when we got to Peru, we like hit the ground running with planning the groups and then traveling and visiting partners, and then the pandemic and everything just kind of shut down from there. So unfortunately, no, but we have a harness for Leandro, our son, and we are ready to get back out there at some point when we find rock, even a gym.
There you go.
Great. Anyone, do you want to say anything about what we're going to do this week?
I have a question. before we get
Okay.
into that. I was wondering how you got your start in mission work.
My start. Okay. My parents are both pastors, and I'm not saying that's the reason, but I'm giving background to me, are both retired now Presbyterian pastors. And so being in the church world is one thing. I actually went to a Lutheran college, but they have a similar program. I don't know if you've heard of the Young Adult Volunteer Program. So I heard, we had a chapel in my university, and one woman came who was in this equivalent of the Young Adult Volunteer Program and just spoke of her time in, I think it was Ireland. And Ireland's, yeah. And I think something in that kind of sparked something in me of like being abroad. I had been to Africa the year before for Habitat for Humanity with college. My parents always kind of said they wanted their kids to experience, you know, a culture abroad. You know, what does that look like somewhere outside of the US? Anyway, so I did my young adult volunteer program in India, in Kerala, India. And that was huge. That was for so many reasons. It was one, just being away from my culture. I think two, I used to say like it was kind of a losing my identity, maybe US identity, to like find a new one. But I don't, as I reflect on it more and more, 20 something years later, I think it's more a peeling back of who you are, letting yourself kind of be open to other experiences and cultures and perspectives. And so in India, it was just that experience, this immersion experience. It was also, there's a Joining Hands program in India, and I learned about kind of justice work, which I had not really experienced hands-on. Like I'd heard about it, my parents talk about it, but it was being there and seeing it, I think that really got me. And I was lucky in that year that they had a regional gathering for the mission coworkers of that area. And so we got to travel to Indonesia to meet those mission coworkers. And I think even talking with them again just sparked something, and they're all, every mission coworker is different, has different perspectives, different ministries. And so when I came back after that year, definitely changed in many different ways, eyes opened in many different ways. I had my teaching degree and I was looking for, my family now jokes about this, but I was looking to teach either in Columbus, and at that same time, the PCUSA offered me a job in a Joining Hands network in Sri Lanka, and the capital is Colombo. So is this, they called to ask if I wanted to serve as a mission coworker in Sri Lanka. And I think that opening of that door, it wasn't a simple yes, definitely. It was not like, yep, totally, God's calling me, I'm doing that. I really had to sit and kind of think about, so my family jokes, was it Colombo or Columbus? Where am I gonna, where am I gonna go? But in the end, I think I went around and did presentations after my YAB year about what I learned about Jesus's ministry and Jesus's call to go. And I said, well, I can't kind of go around and do that and not at least try it out myself, in that sense, in going out. I'm not saying that's the only way to do Jesus's ministry, but for me. And so I served in Sri Lanka with Joining Hands for 4 years. And then as that finished up, a position in Bolivia and South America opened up to be a facilitator of that Joining Hands network. So these doors just kind of opened up. I mean, divine providence, if you will. And then as the Bolivian network was kind of closing or moving in a different direction, this position in Peru opened up. But the spark, I would say the biggest spark was my YAV, my young adult volunteer year, and would recommend it and would talk about it way more. I mean, if you want to, I mean, you can, if you're interested, I mean, that was definitely the big impetus. And yeah.
I just wanted to add, Chenoa, that we are going to, we will be doing some work for Habitat, the local Habitat affiliate here.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So, and there's a home that was built by the high school in town, by students at the high school. They framed it up, pretty much constructed
Pretty much the outside.
yeah.
They did everything on the outside of the house.
And then they,
And then how it worked, once they moved the house, they had built it in 2 halves. Sure, the girls probably know better than me. Once they did the 2 halves, they transported it to the road. And then once they put it all together, and now they're doing all the inside. I don't know if that's just the kids though. Or
no, yeah,
I'm not sure how much the kids are working on that.
right.
But they did, it was a 2-year
I think
process,
so.
right?
Yeah. It was
You probably, yeah, it was a 2-year process. They had the seniors in the one class 2 years ago did the first half, and then this year seniors in that class did the second half. Yeah, and then apparently they're partnering with Habitat, I think every 2 years, right? They're supposed to have another house built. every 2
Yeah,
years or something.
there's a program now at the high school that's establishing itself, so that the part of the program to also teach students construction will be to build this house for Habitat. So it's It's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
That was a big, my parents kind of, one of their covenants when they got married was that they wanted each of their children to experience, somewhere abroad. And I hadn't done that. And I was very involved in Habitat in university. And then one professor offered this trip to Lesotho. I think it was his first one. It was the first one. Like he had a strong partnership with Lesotho, I think, in his like doctorate and studies and stuff. But this was the first time he was kind of partnering, and that was also a very big influence. I think like that was my first time abroad. I mean, yeah, it's just a different, just opens your eyes in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's great. Anyone else? No? All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you. I look forward to being with you all.
November 13th.
Yeah.
On our calendar. And I just found out, I was telling them that I just happened to Google Peruvian food. And do you know, we actually have some Peruvian restaurants within like 5 miles of the church.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I don't know. I know you have certain dietary restrictions, but I thought, well, that's really interesting. There's a little bit of a community here that I didn't even really know about. So
They have ceviche. I recommend that.
oh, yes, I have had that. Yes. Yeah. So, all right. Well, thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you so much. We'll
Take
see you.
care.
All right. Have a good summer.
Bye.
Bye.
Let's see.